METHLAND, The Death and Life of an American Small Town by Nick Redding. This book is about the meth problem in Oelwein, Iowa. The author did his research for the book between 2005 and 2007. He wanted to know what caused this mid-American town to become so consumed by meth. He said meatpacking workers used meth because they hoped to stay awake long enough to take double shifts. But when small businesses went bankrupt, meth labs opened to replace them. People started referring to Oelwein as Methlehem. Meth can be made in a bathtub with various household chemicals. Small-town cooks in Oelwein make a kind of meth called Nazi cold, which relies on anhydrous ammonia, a chemical fertilizer that farmers spray on their fields, and pseudoephedrine, rendered from Sudafed and Contac. Lab locations in Iowa have been in bait and tackle shops, river barges, tunnels, the cab of a combine, kitchen sinks, bathtubs, motel rooms, a high school locker room, and a retirement home. Making meth is dangerous. The extreme heat of the anhydrous ammonia can burn through the skin to the bone. Meth residue can bind to food, countertops, microwave walls, sink basins, and human lung tissue for days after being synthesized. The effects of meth include bleeding skin sores, internal organs shrunken because of dehydration, brain depleted of neural transmitters, and a host of other issues. A person can literally fall apart from the inside out. Roland Jarvis, an Oelwein resident, blew his mother's house up while cooking a batch of meth. The fire melted most of his hands and face off. It started in 2001 when he had a hallucination. He thought police hung live human heads in the trees of his yard. These, he thought, were informants. The heads conveyed messages to a black helicopter hovering over the house that Jarvis used to make meth in his mother's basement. So he poured chemicals down the drain. These chemicals included anhydrous ammonia, common lantern fluid, denatured alcohol, kerosene, and hydrochloric acid. Then he did the stupidest thing a person could do in this situation, is he lit a cigarette. The blast was so strong it blew out the windows and singed every part of his body that wasn't covered in clothing. The author said, in the space of several more tenths of a second, all his exposed body hair burnt off. When he looked down, he saw that his tube socks were somehow no longer on his feet. For 45 minutes, Jarvis made one trip after another into his mother's house, even as the fire spread from room to room and floor to floor. He filled a plastic mop bucket over and over and fought the fire relentlessly. Following one of his trips outside, Jarvis looked down and saw what he thought was egg white on his bare arms. It was not egg white. It was the viscous state of his skin now that the water had boiled out of it. Jarvis flung it off himself, and then he saw that where the egg white had been, he could now see roasting muscle. He looked at his legs and his abdomen. His skin was dripping off his body in sheets. His fingers had burnt off his hands. His nose was gone too. He ran back and forth among the gathered neighbors, unable to speak, for his esophagus and his voice box had cooked inside his throat. Jarvis begged for someone to shoot him because the pain was unbearable. He was burning alive. Not even the paramedics knew how to respond. Meth is synonymous with this kind of deranged behavior exemplified by Roland Jarvis. Jarvis is one of the local legends for staying high on meth for 28 days straight. He had had 4 heart attacks, couldn't sleep, and rarely had an appetite. Most of his teeth were gone, and the ones that he had left were black and decaying. He was in constant pain. His muscles ached and his joints were stiff. Since he was unable to shoot up with his finger stubs, he had taught himself to hold a pipe and lighter so that he could resume his meth habit. In other words, he was freebasing. When the meth addict doesn't sleep, he or she starts to experience memory loss and hallucinations. A common hallucination that meth addicts experience is insects crawling out of their skin. I knew a former meth addict who had this experience years later after she quit meth, but the hallucination was still there. The meth high has 5 parts to it: the rush, the high, the shoulder, the tweak, and the withdrawal. The rush is the feeling of euphoria. The high is the hours-long period of great confidence and sense of well-being. For men, blood flow to the penis increases. There's also a need for sex. The shoulder period is when the euphoria starts to plateau and decreases dramatically. The tweak is when the users fall. It's named for the physical manifestations of what amounts to the brain's running on empty. This is the most dangerous stage because it's unpredictable and can appear like psychosis, including hallucinations. During this stage, tweakers can hurt themselves or those around them. The withdrawal stage includes constipation, headaches, joint pain, shaking, and hyperventilation. The meth withdrawal timeline begins 24 hours after last use and can last between a couple of days to weeks. The author says meth abuse in Oelwein is caused by globalization and dwindling economies. Meth moved into the new economic gap. There are lots of tragic stories in this book. This book is very depressing. But if you want to be even more depressed, then look at videos of interviews with meth addicts on YouTube. There are plenty. You don't even need this book if that side of life interests you the way it interests me. Thank you for watching. Bye.